Hi, and welcome to A Balanced Life. I'm Patricia, and I'm so happy to be here with you, creating this space around self care, especially if we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. As I've said in previous videos, I came to YouTube looking for community around self care. And there was a lot of content, really fun and informative around skincare and what we wear, and maybe also what we eat. I was looking, though, for a conversation that went a little bit deeper, that maybe started from our inside out rather than from our outside in. Self care can be overwhelming if we're not sure of how to bring self care into our lives. It can be overwhelming if we think we have to make huge life changes. I like to think about self care as the small incremental additions or practices or ways to alleviate stress that we can bring into our lives that are accessible, simple, and that also have an immediate effect. So, in these videos, we're going to be sharing those practices, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback and the practices that work for you. If you could put those in the comments, then what I'd love to do in the future is visit those and talk about the ways that you've discovered about bringing some self care into your life. At this point in our lives, there's a lot that's out of our control. We are aging. But I also like to think of it that it's if we've made it this far, then frankly, we won the lottery. And some of us have health issues. Some of us are still working. Maybe we have the burden of caregiving. And I don't want to say burden, but it really, if we're having an honest conversation, it can be. Maybe we have elderly parents or a spouse who's not well. Maybe we have young children who've moved back into our homes and need extra support from us that we were not anticipating. We have big hearts, we've lived long lives, and we've learned a lot. And so, this time in our lives, it's about also making sure that we have time for ourselves and that we have resources for ourselves. It doesn't have to mean a lot of money. Maybe it's time. Time is a precious resource. Maybe it's just space in our day to focus on ourselves. That would be a gift. So that's really the intention of this channel, and as I said, I'm looking forward to discovering and learning from you as well. I've been in the self-care space now for almost 10 years. I've studied it, I've taught it, I do workshops, I do big presentations, and honestly, the most invigorating parts of this process for me has been in the sharing of information. So I look forward to hearing and learning from you as well. Today's video, though, we're going to be talking about boundaries. And boundaries are a challenge, especially if you grew up in the generation as I did, that first of all, when you were younger, it was better to be seen and not heard. So you didn't really learn how to express yourself. Also, from my personal experience, I felt a lot of joy, and I do still feel a lot of joy in giving what I can to the people that I love, in working really hard on the projects that I've invested in, and of really trying to be, there 150% for my friends and family when they need me. I'm talking about emotional care, not just physical, not financial, really about my own mental and emotional health when I think about boundaries. Because certainly when I'm working on my mental health and I'm working on my emotional health, it actually has a positive effect as well on my physical health. But when we think about boundaries, I think a lot of us have the misconception that boundaries are about keeping people out. And if we think about self-care as beginning and ending with ourselves, then the practice of self-care, the practice of creating boundaries, is about understanding what's important to us and what our limits and limitations are. If you work in nonprofit, or if you're a teacher, or you work in community health and wellness, maybe you're a professional caregiver, maybe you work in the medical field, any volunteer or professional career that is really at the front facing of community, then chances are you're a giver. And givers, we love to give, give, give. And we actually almost sometimes feel that it's a little bit selfish to take. But it's important to note and to remember that if we don't look after ourselves, if we don't fill up our own teapot before we fill up everybody else's teacups, then we are going to empty and we'll be depleted. The danger with that is, first of all, not only do we not have enough resources to look after ourselves, but then when someone who we love does need something from us, we don't have the ability to meet that need. So self-care begins and ends with us as individuals. So only you can decide for yourself what your limits are, and only I can decide for myself what my limits are. But here's how I like to think about it. I like to think about it as a circle. All right, so my boundaries are around in a circle around me. And I'm learning to identify how much I'm giving and then what those triggers are within me that let me know that, oh, I'm starting to deplete myself, my resources. I need to hold back a little bit. Or maybe just have to learn to say no, which is really difficult to do. But boundaries, as I said, are not about keeping other people out. They're not about controlling other people's responses. That can be a difficult thing as well for those of us who are givers. We want people to feel good. We want the people who we've invested our lives and love with to know that they can rely on us. And we want to be there and support them in every way we can. But supporting them does not mean we have to give up everything either. So it's understanding and learning for yourself based on your own value system. Have you reflected, who am I? What kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to be perceived? And most importantly, how do I want to show up for relationships? Well, maybe showing up for a relationship is understanding I can take a phone call. I can listen to you, but maybe I can't go and meet you in person. That's a very practical and small example of setting a boundary. It doesn't have to be a full no, but when it has to be a full no, it can be a no, I can't do that, or no, that's not going to work for me right now. There's so many ways that we can bring boundaries, and especially if we've not been used to setting them, people are going to have a reaction to them one way or another. I remember there was a time in my life when I had to set some really strong boundaries because I had not set clear boundaries initially in a series of relationships. And when I did set those boundaries, when I stopped trying to be everything for everybody, there were people there who were waiting to have a fulfilling and healthy relationship with me. They didn't want me to step up and be everything for them. And at the same time, they wanted to be for me what I needed. So now, in creating a boundary, not only was I able to understand how much I could give, I could also understand what I needed. And then I had a better language around and better clarity around how I was going to ask for that. So boundaries are important because we can deplete ourselves, we can be totally forget ourselves, we can have compassion fatigue and empathy fatigue. We can start to be triggered, especially for those of our friends or relationships that are going through really challenging times. How can we set up a clear boundary so that we can be there for them, as they need us, and in a way that's effective for them and for a continuing healthy relationship? Boundaries are also about time. So, am I giving all of my time to other people and other things? Especially if you get a great joy out of being involved in something. Volunteering is hard to quit, right? You've decided to volunteer or give of your time and resources, talent and expertise to an organization or a cause that needs it and that you feel fulfilled by, you have a shared sense of purpose, it's extremely fulfilling. And it's hard then not to give, 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 give. But if we want to be in those nonprofit and cause related or organizational volunteer positions for a long time, if we want to have some longevity, then we have got to find some balance, and we've got to learn to, step by step, allocate our resources as we go, as we can, as they suit us. And guess what? Boundaries change all the time. We are evolving human beings, and so our boundaries are going to be too. And that's okay. So when we're setting up boundaries and we're feeling concerned that people are going to react poorly to them or poorly to us, it's important to remember that we're actually not responsible for that. If you are a kind person, if you're respectful, if you do the best you can, that's all that can be expected. If a friend says to you that there's a weekly coffee that they can't do anymore, they just can't meet that coffee date, but maybe they could meet twice a month. Would you be upset by that? If you are upset by that, then maybe you have to think about, well, it's not about me, it's about something that my friend needs. And if I'm going to be a good friend, I'm going to step up and accept that from them. And that's fine. I'll find something else to do with my time, or I'll invest it in myself. Well, the same is true in reverse. You would have kindness and compassion for your friend, and you have to have the same for yourself. We don't always have to be running after the demands of others. We are allowed, and it's important to be able to say, here's what my limits are, here's what I can do, and do to the best of my abilities in a way that's going to be the most effective for all of us. All right, so that's, what a boundary is. That's why it's important. And it's also important to remember again that, especially with adults, it's different with children setting boundaries. That's a whole different conversation. But when you're working and dealing with adults and you're trying to set new boundaries, it's important to remember that their responses are about them. We're not a reflection of other people. We're a reflection of ourselves. Okay? If I'm going to be trying to always make other people happy because I think it makes me look good, I'm chasing an impossible dream. There is no way that I can ever live up to other people's expectations of me. I need to live up to my own expectations. Self-care, which begins and ends with me, encourages that kind of deep reflection about myself, about how I want to be reflected to myself by myself. And boundaries are a key way to do that. I think another important aspect of boundaries to remember is that it is your responsibility, it is my responsibility to set boundaries for myself. I can't expect other people to somehow intuit or read my mind about when I'm at my limits. That it's up to me to be able to articulate. That can be really difficult. So, how do we do that? How do we create boundaries? What are the steps we can take that can effectively share what we have decided for ourselves is a limit? Well, we can do it a number of ways. First of all, we can be proactive in it. So I can already have decided that, during the week, it's not great for me to stay out past 9 o'clock at night. It's not great for me, frankly, to stay up past 10 o'clock at night on the week, and also frankly on the weekends too. I mean, this is what's happened to me. I have become like the early in the afternoon person if you want to meet me for a coffee, or immediately after work, but in the evenings it just doesn't work for me. So I've learned to not schedule those things. I mean, it sounds so simple when I say it, but when I have friends who have an event going on, or want to get together for a bit of an evening, I really have to think hard about whether I can honestly make that happen. I'm not going to say yes just for the sake of saying yes and then hope that for some reason either it gets canceled or that I cancel at the last minute. I mean, yes, things come up. That's fine. That's life. But if I know in my heart I'm actually likely not going to go, then I'm not going to I'm not going to book it. I'm not going to make that commitment to somebody and break it because that doesn't feel right for me. That is not in keeping with my value system. But my boundaries, if I'm clear on my boundaries and I can say, you know what? Typically, I'm not good at night, so I'm going to have to pass, and maybe I can go to this. Maybe we can meet for coffee or do something together at another time. It's also true that if I have set aside the time for myself in the evenings and I know that I'm not good at going out at night, that when those occasions do occur that I do want to, I'm rejuvenated for it. I'm ready for it. I can say with confidence that yes, I'm going to go to that event. I can't wait. I will be there. And then I do show up because I have been reserving and preserving my energy. So it has a wonderful effect. Boundaries are actually incredibly freeing, right? It's not what I'm not going to do. It's like I know the full extent of what I can and will do before it starts to deplete. Because I've recognized and set that space for myself, I then better understand how I'm feeling in those moments and can better assess if yes, it's something I'm going to do or no, it's not. So that's one way about being proactive. The other one is the reaction. So you are asked, maybe it's a last minute out of the blue to do something. Maybe it's more that somebody needs something from you. And you have a hard time saying no. Either it's no to this particular person or no to this kind of request, but you feel in your heart and in your gut that doing it is going to be and cause some real challenges for yourself. Sometimes people feel this financially, especially if they're older and they have relatives who come to them for money. They're feeling like, oh, I really do want to help because you sincerely believe in and love this person and want them to succeed and you want to alleviate their pain. But in doing so, it's going to cause you harm. Well, there are ways to do that with empathy and with kindness and with respect. So you get a chance, you say, let me think about it. Let me think about this request. And it doesn't have to be financial. That's just an example that a lot of older people find themselves in the position of. Another could be more, again, about time. There's only so much time you have in your day, and maybe it feels like an infringement on something that you had already planned to do for yourself. Whatever the question and whatever your reason for responding is, and you don't need a reason either, other than just, I don't want to do it. The way to then create that new boundary or reestablish or reaffirm a boundary that you've been trying to set is to either A, say, let me think about it, and then when you come back, say, I've thought about it, this is not going to work for me at this time. And maybe if you have an option for an alternate solution, if it's a problem someone's come to you with, you can say, I do have an alternate solution if that would interest you. But you don't have to, especially if you find it difficult to say no in the moment, you don't have to say no right away. And you don't have to say yes. You can say, let me think on it. Then, in that time that you're thinking about it, you're really rooting for yourself and deeply contemplating on why this isn't right for you. And then when you respond, you have had a chance to create an answer that works for you, that is in keeping with the kind of person you are, and again, reaffirms your boundary. So there's the proactive, and then there's the reactionary. As I said earlier, what I love about boundaries is that boundaries are actually quite freeing. They don't hold us back, and instead, they let us soar. I now know that for me, and it changes all the time, certainly my boundaries in the winter are different than they are in the summer because of just my capacity is different at that time of year. I don't know if you feel this way too, but I still in the winter tend to hunker down a little bit. I like to be a little bit quieter. I think the evenings are darker, so that has a lot to do with it. But during the summer, I'm freer. I feel like I'm out more. I have more energy. So, my boundaries shift a little bit in terms of maybe my physical and my time needs. But my mental health and my emotional health are very much tied to my ability to keep my boundaries clear and concise and um, firm for myself. I don't go around telling people my boundaries. I don't need to. I live them. And that is really the best way to honor and share your boundaries with those who are important to you. Being able to say no, understanding your limits, and then walking through this world with respect and kindness for others, but mostly for yourself, is really at the heart of self care. So, thank you so much for listening and for being here. I'm really looking forward to hearing your comments and maybe your experiences around boundaries and self care in general. Please share a practice. I'd love to learn from you as well. And until next time, do something kind for yourself, think something good about yourself, and remember you are important and self care is about you.